So I'd like to talk a little bit about water governance in interstitial world-class Delhi. And by interstitial, I mean the spaces between what's considered world-class. In this, I mean informal lifeways that you see in the different bastis or slum areas, but also in the formal areas that have low-income lifeways, but often cobble together formal housing with informal resource circuits of exchange. My research explores the role of water access in these interstitial transitional areas of Delhi, India, through the perspective of marginalized urban domestic workers who have fluidity over Delhi's fragmented landscapes and waterscapes. This research draws on 18 months of ethnographic fieldwork, tracing the water narratives that mark people's relationships to their homes, their city, and the larger circuits of their urban economies. So first, I know, Scott, you wanted us to connect the mismanagement of water resources to poverty. In a forthcoming article in Society and Natural Resources, I explain how the timed water delivery systems of Delhi are keeping some people in poverty. I refer to this as the difference between affluence and stagnancy. Let's see. Oops. As water flows are increasingly available for cities, as Joy said, industry and large-scale farmers, lifestyles and livelihoods of others become more precarious. Approximately 1/3 of my informants migrated from India's rural areas to gain access to more secure flows of capital and resources, including water. Due to lack of prioritization of rural water, many saw farming as a stagnant lifeway. Stagnancy manifests itself in macroeconomic flows and abstractions, certainly, but it also manifests itself in the ability to collect water every single day. As capital grows, families are able to access technologies that make water collection require less of a struggle. Essentially, these technologies, from simple vessels, wide diameter pipes, and bicycles, to the technologies of the middle class that Srinivasan was talking about, the formal piped infrastructure, motor pumps, automatic fill devices, and generators. These, as Doreen Massey might argue, compress space and time, which allows uneven surges and hydrological and economic circulation, both. Without these technologies to have access to water, people need to wait, sometimes for 4 or 5 hours at roadside pickup points, and in anticipation for the 13-minute or so window where the daily water tanker arrives. This brings us to another of Scott's questions. What pervades thinking about water and its allocation in this sector? The limiting factor of their water allocation in the 2 neighborhoods that I studied most closely is not, as many would think, and as many experience in other areas of Delhi, a problem of insufficient amounts of water allocated by the government. In fact, the water delivered to the tank is often not exhausted, even in the summer months, and the tankers go back with some water still inside. Nor, on the other hand, is it exactly a problem of water quality, at least when it's delivered by the tanker, where my months of data indicated that it was actually some of the most pure water in the entire city. In my location, the problem, simply put, is that the residents must become the infrastructure that the city does not provide. In this way, water makes wealth and makes poverty. The people sitting on the side of the road or in tenement hallways waiting for water, they're not just waiting for that. They're also waiting for the government to treat them with equity and waiting to be incorporated in the new India. This equity and incorporation require the government to acknowledge the legitimacy of the urban poor as productive citizens, without whom a world-class city would be impossible. When the government plans for infrastructure like housing, water, transportation, it has a history of prioritizing the upper and middle classes. And for equity and incorporation to begin, at the minimum, the poor, both their time and their work, must no longer be externalized in the system. For now, waiting means becoming infrastructure, the infrastructure that the government doesn't provide. Essentially, the water security of the urban poor hinges on this ability to build a lifestyle of becoming infrastructure, where stationary waiting is often the only way to facilitate flows. So traditional water governance is a function of politics, but also of power. And as such, it produces inequality within this segment. In Delhi's informal housing communities like the Basti and the legitimate legal tenement communities of the urban poor, the residents are externalized by the city as elements of the water infrastructure. The government and city planners, including the officials at the Delhi Jal Board, do not construct adequate piped water input nor sewage output to the Basti, but instead rely on residents to pick up where the infrastructure leaves off. People become the stationary pipes, waiting to become temporary conduits, and they become the motors as they power and push the water to the place where it's needed, and sweep it into open gutters and guide it out once more. Access to life's essential resource is based on the ability to become this infrastructure, to be stagnant. And by valuing the time and work of the urban poor, essential deliveries of water become based on their ability to either ante up or to become the infrastructure. The idle waiting actually prevents the residents from working, both inside and outside of the home. But work and economic stability is one of many of the freedoms and capabilities that come from equitable utilization of water. By incorporating the low-income informal sector residents into the equitable networks of water distribution, it frees them to perform their other identities, such as one of my informants named Muna, who otherwise misses the azan or the call to prayer, or like Priyanka, who is truant from school. The freedom to pursue development opportunities is important not only for individuals, but even more germane to civic governance. It allows citizens to embrace development through this individuality, which ultimately constructs a more robust and diverse urban economy. This brings us to the relationship of water institutions to this specific segment of society. To many in the low-income informal sector, hydrological circulation and economic circulation can be interrupted or corrupted with informal exchanges. I tracked bribery narratives in my field sites, which linked the informal flow of foreign goods, both in the sense of being international, but also external to traditional systems of exchange, as commensurate with the informal flow of water, rendering an ideally equal distribution system into a weighted circuit that rewards economic affluence with hydrological affluence. Bribery for water access with world-class goods was believed to happen from the micro-level tanker drivers and landlords to the highest officials in the Ministry of Water Resources. This is to say that in the minds of residents, access to economic power means access to water, and that the government is complicit in maintaining this bias. The fact of the matter is that the narrative does not suggest bribery with common domestically produced goods or with liquid currency. Rather, it suggests that the bribes are a part of a transnational post-economic liberalization India that incorporates water in those very ways. So this brings us to some of the solutions in practice, both the co-production of public services through building coalitions with the low-income informal sector. And as Joy mentioned, transparency and cooperation are one of the ways that my informants also solve some of their water problems. In the Basti, an NGO bolstered the emergence of two different types of groups, small business owners and also neighborhood women. These groups were taken on field trips to the local officials' offices where they met face-to-face. After this, the groups constructed their own protocols for electing leadership and maintaining contact. During my time in the field, this relationship created a sense of ownership as residents became an extension of public service leadership. The two major wins were the addition of one water tanker delivery every single morning, and also the increased dredging of the informal sewers, which bubbled up even not during the monsoon. So this can be reproduced in the formal tenement buildings as well. However, the biggest barrier to bottom-up coalition building is, as you might imagine, as I said earlier about water collection, it's time. The strongest groups in this regard paired those with jobs outside of the neighborhood with those who remained in the neighborhood all day. This diversity gave the groups the power as watchdogs with a mobile network for comparison and action. And I'd love to hear from you guys more about the solutions in practice in your particular areas, especially some of the attendees. Thank you.